Sega's Master System back in the late 80s was barely making a mark in the US gaming market, so when it came time to release their next console, they needed to make sure it was the system to own. And they certainly made an effort by doubling the bits plus touting a more edgy attitude with the games, even going as far as saying they could do what the NES couldn't. That was true hardware and software wise, but gamers wouldn't care if you didn't have a good controller to go along with the package. Luckily, Sega came up with a new original controller that made the Genesis complete. This is the Sega Genesis controller, the primary controller for the Sega Genesis. It's unmistakable to think that it'd be anything else, not only because of its logo smack dab in the center, but also its color that matches the system and unique shape that looks like vampire fangs if said vampire was wearing a mouthpiece. That may be a weird comparison, but fuck it, you're getting original content right here. As we get closer to the controller, we see its very solid D-pad, complete with the 4 directional inputs as well as side indicators and extra white labels on the outer ring. But I'm not being entirely truthful because you may be surprised to hear this, but this really isn't a D-pad. Sure, it may look like one, but lest you forget last episode, Nintendo by this time held the copyright for the D-pad, so other companies had to find a way around to get directional input on their controller. So Sega came up with the cleverly named D button, where instead of it being one whole plastic piece, the D button is in fact enclosed in a plastic circle, and a ball pivot sits in the center of the button interface to keep it centered. All the small changes keep the lawsuits from happening. Moving right along past the logo again, we have your typical gray start button, and not 1, not 2, but 3 trigger buttons, all labeled from the first 3 letters of the alphabet, of course. No surprises with the A and B buttons, but the C button is the innovation at hand. You see, it wasn't common for most controllers to come with more than 2. Even the TurboGrafx controller had 2 buttons with its 16-bit power, but Sega knew the kind of blast processing it was handling and gave us gamers an extra button to help ease the way for easy accessibility to the new 16-bit graphics. Granted, it wouldn't last long when the Super Nintendo and the 6-button layout came around, but for the time it was exciting. I'm going to take this opportunity to show you that I have 2 controllers. You may think they're pretty much the same, but they aren't, oddly enough. As you can see, one is longer than the other, even having a different connecting input on the end to better identify the difference for those who need it. The back doesn't help much as they both have the same model number, Sega logo, and Taiwanese origin, but I would have thought they would label them differently. Either that or I was just looking for a reasonable excuse to check the back of the controller. Can't blame me for trying. It doesn't really matter anyway, as with this controller we have an abundance of games that you'll have the ability to control in a few different formats. It's amazing the many games that you'll be able to play with the Sega Genesis, as you'll be covering a wide range of regular Genesis games like Sonic and Streets of Rage, Sega CD games like Sonic CD and Panic, 32X games with Knuckles Chaotix and Doom, and even Sega CD 32X games like Night Trap and Fahrenheit. I mentioned Sonic a lot for the obvious reasons, not any bad games either because I haven't come across one yet. Night Trap is a guilty pleasure. The Sega Genesis controller will no doubt have to be a get if you're going to grab a Genesis for yourself. It'll be your primary guide through all your blast processing adventures with Hedgehogs, Street Fighters, and Sports Stars. There may be plenty of other options out there that you'll have to stay tuned for, but this will be the best starting point. Hopefully your hands will be able to grip it just fine. I got the big hands to get around, but it could be a little funky to get the hang of. A little lightweight and edginess can't hold me back from playing and doing what Nintendo don't. Got any fond memories with this controller/accessory? Tell me about it by leaving a comment. If you like what you see, be sure to leave a like. If you think others would like this, share the video around. And if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button pronto. This is BrianTheBlue, and I'll see you later.